A strategic alignment is one of those ideas that sounds quite obvious, almost too obvious, until you see what happens when it's missing. Now, in mergers and acquisitions, in private equity, and in enterprise leadership more broadly, most of the value is not lost because of the ambition being wrong. It's lost because the organizations was not aligned to deliver value. And this is really the real issue, not whether the deal looked compelling on paper, not whether the model showed upside, not whether the strategy desk was polished, but whether purpose, strategy, structure, culture, capabilities, the management systems, and leadership were actually pulling in the same direction. And this is why strategic alignment matters so much. Too often, transactions are discussed as if value creation begins with price and ends with synergies, but the real story is much more demanding than that. A deal is only the starting point. The real test comes afterwards when organizations, operating models, leadership teams, and cultures are expected to come together and perform as a coherent enterprise. And this is where alignment becomes so decisive. And this is where the strategic alignment framework is so useful. At its core, it asks a very simple question, but a very powerful question. Do the critical elements of the enterprise fit together in a way that reinforces performance, or do they quietly work against one another? You can think of the framework and the enterprise as a chain. It begins with purpose. Why does the business exist? What's the enduring logic of the enterprise? What are we really trying to build? If that isn't clear, the strategy becomes opportunistic rather than deliberate. Then we move to strategy. Where will we play? How will we win? What capabilities are truly differentiating? And in M&A and private equity, this is often where confusion begins because firms can easily mistake acquisition activity for the strategy. But buying assets is not a strategy in itself. Strategy is the clear logic that explains why those assets belong together and how their combination creates more value than their separation. Of course, we have to then focus on structure. Once a strategic logic is clear, the organization has to be designed to support it. Think reporting lines, governance, decision rights, integration, architecture, and accountability all matter. A business cannot pursue agility with a structure designed for bureaucracy. It cannot pursue customer intimacy with fragmented incentives. It cannot promise transformation while preserving silos. Then we have to focus on culture. This is often treated as a secondary element in a transaction when it's actually central. Culture is not a soft afterthought. It's how the priorities are interpreted, how decisions are really made when no one's in the room. It shapes whether people collaborate, whether trade-offs are surfaced early, whether difficult conversations happen honestly, and where the organization can move with trust and clarity under pressure. We then have to also focus on capabilities, organizational capabilities, and management systems. Can the business actually do what the strategy requires? Are the financial, operational, digital people systems aligned to make delivery possible? Many organizations underestimate this. They announce strategic ambitions, but the underlying system, the processes, the capabilities are not built to support that. And this is where execution then begins to fall apart. Of course, within all of this, leadership is key because alignment is not sustained by itself. Leadership is what holds the whole system together. Leadership decides what matters, what gets prioritized, what trade-offs are made, what behaviors are rewarded, and whether the organization stays coherent when conditions become more demanding. And that, to me, is the real power of strategic alignment. It forces us to look beyond the transaction, the day-to-day, and into the operating reality of value creation. In mergers and acquisition, of course, this matters enormously. The real risk is often not the deal itself, but the integration. So organization can appear strategically compatible on paper, yet still fail to realize value because operating models, technology, decision-making styles, and culture don't align. When integration planning is weak, synergies are delayed, accountability becomes blurred, and the value that that justified the acquisition begins to erode. In private equity, the same principles applies. Even if the language is different, private equity talks about thesis, about platform, about buy and build, operating models, transformation plans, and exit readiness. But underneath all of this, all of that is alignment. Is the asset aligned to the investment thesis? Is management aligned to the value creation plan? Is the organization ready from a capability and system perspective to execute at pace? So the logic is exactly the same. And this is why the best investors increasingly behave like financial engineers and or less like financial engineers and more like enterprise designers. They know that capital alone isn't enough. They need leadership fit, strategic clarity, disciplined execution, bottom up ownership, and operating cadence that converts ambition into measurable outcomes. And this is really what turns a value creation plan into an execution machine. And this is also why strategic alignment is so relevant in today's environment. We're in a period where capital is more selective, holding periods are longer, and value creation has to come from operational improvement more than multiple expansion alone. And that raises the bar. It means that both corporate acquirers, private equity firms need far more rigorous understanding of how acquired businesses actually fit within the broader ecosystem of value creation. Now, from a financier's perspective, this changes the question that actually matter. Not just is the deal financeable, but is the strategic rationale genuinely coherent? Not just what are the synergies, but what would have to be true across culture, systems, governance, leadership for those synergies to be realized. So it's not just what is the underwriting case, but the question is the business aligned enough to execute that case under real operating conditions? And this is why strategic alignment is not a soft concept. It's one of the hard-edged disciplines in business. It's about fit, it's about coherence, it's about execution integrity. And when you apply that lens to M&A and private equity, a few practical implications follow. The first is that diligence should go beyond financial, legal, and commercial. It should test alignment as well. Is there alignment between the target's business model and the buyer's strategic intent, between value creation plan and management ability, between integration ambition and organizational capacity? Second, integration should be designed before closing. It's not improvised afterwards. If the first 100 days are clear, the organization will revert to legacy habit and misalignment will widen. The third point, culture should be treated as a source of value or valuation leakage. Most integrations failure is not dramatic. They cumulative. They come from unspoken friction, duplication of work, unclear priorities, defensive behavior, inconsistent signals, and absence of trust. Value creation should be linked back to the enterprise model. This means recognizing long-term performance is shaped not only by financial inputs, but by the interaction between strategy, operating model, culture, governance, talent, systems, and leadership. When those elements reinforce one another, value can be compounded. When they don't, even a very promising transaction can disappoint or introduce significant risk. So when I think about strategic alignment in M&A or private equity, I don't see it as an abstract management theory. I see it as one of the clearest explanations for why some deals compound value and others fall short. So the best transactions are not just priced well, but they're also well aligned. They have a clear purpose, a coherent strategic logic, a clear strategic approach, an organizational structure designed to support delivery, a culture that reinforces how the business needs to perform, management systems that enable speed, transparency, and accountability, and leadership that can keep all of this connected under pressure. And this is what alignment really is. It's discipline of ensuring that the enterprise is capable of delivery of what the transaction promises. And in a world where transactions are more scrutinized, capital is more demanding, and value creation has become more operational than ever, that may be one of the most important sources of advantage any corporate acquirer or equity investor can build on. Thank you for listening.